All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a pretty provocative and, honestly, a kind of unsettling geopolitical theory from a scholar named Professor Jiang Xueqin. And this isn't about predicting the future with a crystal ball. Nope, it's about understanding how a massive conflict could be, well, deliberately engineered.
Now, to really get a handle on this, we're not going to start at the beginning. Let's do things a little differently. We're going to jump right to the end, to the shocking conclusion that Professor Jiang lays out.
Just imagine this. You wake up one morning, you check the news, and that's the headline staring back at you. A huge American invasion force. You know, the ones sent in to get a quick, clean victory in Iran. Well, they're suddenly totally trapped. Can't move forward, can't go back, and their supply lines cut off.
So how on earth does that happen? How does the most powerful military in the world just walk straight into a trap? Well, that's the big question, right? And to answer it, Professor Jiang Xueqin says we have to look at what's happening right now, at the powerful forces he believes are setting the stage for this exact disaster. Okay, let's break it all down. See, according to this theory, this isn't something a future U.S. administration just stumbles into by accident. Professor Jiang actually points to three really powerful interest groups that he thinks are actively, right now, pushing for a major showdown with Iran. So, who are they? Well, the theory names three specific players. First up, you've got the Israel lobby. We're talking a powerful coalition that includes big names like AIPAC and Christians United for Israel. Second, there's what the theory calls Wall Street's empire. Think about the financial interests that really benefit from the US dollar being on top and America's economic dominance. And finally, there's Saudi Arabia. For them, Iran isn't just a rival. They see Iran as a direct existential threat to their very survival. So how do all these different groups connect? Professor Jiang argues it's through key people. He points specifically to Jared Kushner, highlighting his really deep personal ties. For instance, Benjamin Netanyahu used to stay at his family's home when he visited the U.S. And then there's his close relationship with MBS in Saudi Arabia, a relationship that, was followed by a $2 billion investment from the Saudis into Kushner's fund. So the theory presents this as a major channel for influencing U.S. policy.
But look, having the political will to do something, that's not enough, right? The military has to actually believe the plan can work. And this brings us to a really crucial part of this whole theory. The idea that a fundamental shift in U.S. military thinking has left it wide open to exactly this kind of trap.
And you can see that shift right here. I mean, traditional warfare, it's built on these tried and true principles. You need massive forces, you have to protect your supply lines at all costs, and you never let yourself get surrounded. All of that, by the way, requires the public to be on board. But then you have the shock and awe doctrine. It's all about using superior technology, air power, special forces, to get a quick win, basically sidestepping the need for the public's long-term approval. And Professor Jiang's argument is that this shock and awe idea, well, it created a massive sense of hubris, that dangerous overconfidence. It's the belief that because you have the best tech, the American military can win any war, anywhere, against anyone. And that's a dangerous mindset, because it's when you stop questioning your own limits. Now, as proof that this hubris is still around, Professor Jiang points to the recent struggles against Houthi forces in the Red Sea. He brings up this reported quote from President Biden, which is basically, yeah, we know it's not working, but we're going to keep doing it anyway. That's a classic example, right? An administration seeing that a strategy is failing, but just can't or won't change course. It's what happens when that overconfidence hits a wall of reality. Okay, so let's go back to that nightmare scenario in March 2027. We've got the political motivation, we've got the military's overconfidence, now we can really see exactly how this trap is supposed to spring shut.
This is where it all goes wrong. The most basic fundamental rules of warfare are just thrown out the window. First, encirclement. Iran is a natural fortress. It's all mountains. Once you fly your troops in, getting them out is a nightmare. Second, you don't have enough people. 100,000 soldiers trying to control a country of 90 million? No way, it's impossible. And third, and this is the killer, your supply lines are completely exposed. Those resupply planes and helicopters, they're just sitting ducks for anyone with a missile hiding in the mountains. At that point, your soldiers aren't an army anymore. They're hostages.
And here's the thing. Professor Jiang Xueqin argues that this kind of epic mistake isn't some new invention. Not at all. In fact, he says if you just look back through history, you see this exact same pattern, this overconfidence leading to absolute disaster, playing out again and again and again.
He gives us a few key examples to think about.
You've got ancient Athens feeling invincible, they invade Sicily, and their entire army gets wiped out because they couldn't resupply them. Fast forward to Vietnam. U.S. leadership knew the war was a lost cause but couldn't pull out because of something called the sunk cost fallacy, this feeling that you've already put in so much you can't just walk away. And even in the recent Russia-Ukraine war, the theory suggests that sometimes getting good TV footage was more important than making smart military moves.
So you have to be asking, right? If this trap is so obvious and history is littered with examples, why would anyone in their right mind walk into it? Well, this is where Professor Jiang brings in game theory to explain the pretty chilling logic behind what each player actually wants.
And this table just lays out the terrifying math. The US, full of that hubris we talked about, thinks it can get a quick, easy win. Iran, it wants to lure the US into a fight it knows it can't win just to humiliate America on the world stage. But the most cynical calculation, at least according to this theory, comes from Israel and Saudi Arabia. For them, the perfect outcome is a war that completely wrecks Iran and also cripples America's military presence in the region. That would leave them as the undisputed top dogs.
And that brings us to the final and, frankly, most terrifying layer of this whole theory. So, what happens when the American president finally realizes his 100,000 soldiers aren't an army, they're hostages? What do you do? How do you possibly get out of a situation like that?
Well, a cornered superpower is a dangerous thing. Imagine a president who needs to look strong, who needs to save face after such a massive failure. They might feel backed into a corner, pressured to issue the ultimate threat. Let our soldiers go, give them safe passage, or we use nukes.
But here's the twist. This game isn't just between the US and Iran. Professor Jiang's theory says there's one last player, waiting in the wings, ready to make their big move.
Yeah, you guessed it, Russia. According to the theory, Russia, who's probably been coordinating with Iran this whole time, could step onto the world stage and just intervene diplomatically. They could make a simple, powerful statement. Nobody's allowed to use nuclear weapons, period. Any country that does will have to answer for it. And just like that, in one single move, Russia gets to play the part of the global peacemaker, the one who saved the world.
And that's checkmate. That one move completely neutralizes America's ultimate trump card. The US would be totally, completely stuck, trapped in a quagmire with no escape, bleeding money, bleeding credibility on the world stage, and unable to escalate, unable to win, and unable to retreat. It becomes a black hole for American power.
So, who really wins in this scenario? That's the final and most provocative question at the very heart of Professor Jiang Xueqin's Iran trap theory. It really makes you think, right? It forces you to consider that in this incredibly complex game of global strategy, the most obvious move might be a feint, and the real winner might not be who you think it is at all.